Before the first sword was ever drawn, before the first crown was placed on a trembling head, someone somewhere lowered their gaze, let their lips curve into the faintest smile, and change the course of history. Seduction is older than war, older than kings. It is the quiet art that turns enemies into allies, and allies into fools. It does not roar like a battle horn. It whispers. It moves like candlelight in a dark room, catching the eye without demanding it. It slips through the guarded gates of the mind, turning caution into curiosity, curiosity into trust, and trust into surrender. Psychologists today might call it influence. The ancient poets had a simpler word, magic, and it worked. In candlelit chambers, on marble balconies, in bustling marketplaces that smelled of cinnamon, honey, and dust. The right gesture, a pause before speaking, a hand brushing the edge of a goblet, could undo a lifetime of discipline. The right tone, soft, steady, and almost too quiet, could erase fear, reason, even loyalty. Because seduction is never only about beauty. It is about leverage over the mind's most unguarded places. We are all born with desires we do not say out loud, and seduction is the art of unlocking that door without ever appearing to touch it. A soldier may win battles, but a seducer wins without a single drop of blood. A ruler may control armies, but a seducer controls the ruler. It is the skill of making someone believe they are choosing, when in truth they are being guided. The bait is never the trap. The bait is the fantasy, and people will walk willingly toward it. This is not a story of love. It is a story of strategy. We will travel to temples where women in gold bangles danced for the gods, and for the merchants who brought their offerings. We will step onto Cleopatra's perfumed barge, where the Nile itself seemed to bow to her will. We will linger in the mirrored halls of Versailles, where a glance could bankrupt a rival, and a laugh could crown a queen. Every age, every culture, every empire, from the Sumerians to the silver screens of Hollywood, has had its masters of this hidden language. Some used it to survive, some to conquer, some simply to watch the world bend. And as you listen, drifting deeper into the past, you might start to wonder, if this quiet power could move empires, what could it do to you? Long before kings had palaces, long before courts had rules, there were temples, and inside them the first recorded whispers of seduction. In ancient Sumer, nearly 5,000 years ago, desire and divinity were not separate things. The goddess Inanna, radiant, fierce, and impossibly beautiful, was said to have gifted humanity with the arts of love and war. In her honor, temple priestesses didn't just pray. They performed. Imagine a courtyard open to the warm night air, the scent of burning myrrh curling upward into the dark. Torches throw shifting gold light against carved stone walls. A procession begins. Women draped in linen, their arms painted with spirals of ochre, their hair perfumed with frankincense. Every step is deliberate, every glance measured, because here the ritual is not only for the gods, it is for the men who have come to offer their wealth, their harvest, their loyalty. This was the earliest form of transactional allure, the merging of sacred devotion and human longing. And it worked, not because of flesh alone, but because of something far more dangerous, the ability to make a man feel chosen by the divine. Psychologists now might call it ego investment the irresistible pull when someone makes you believe you are extraordinary. The Sumerians simply called it a blessing. From Sumer, the tradition spread. In Babylon, courtesans served in temples dedicated to Ishtar, goddess of love and war. Their beauty was enhanced by kohl-rimmed eyes and cheeks brushed with crushed red ochre. They spoke in poetry, reciting verses that blurred the line between prayer and proposition. And here's the truth. It wasn't about physical perfection. It was about atmosphere. They created a world in which every man felt like the only man. Egypt took the art further. In the great temples along the Nile, priestesses moved like living music, their steps matching the slow rhythm of drums, their hands trailing over lotus blossoms. Every detail was calculated, the rustle of linen, the hint of scented oil warming on the skin, the long pauses between words. This was seduction as ritual theater, a carefully built illusion where anticipation mattered more than any final act. And here's where the psychology deepens. Anticipation is the real seducer. The human brain releases more dopamine in the expectation of pleasure than in the pleasure itself. The ancients, without ever naming the chemical, knew it instinctively. In these temple courts, seduction was not shameful. It was sacred, a gift given, an offering received. And yet, it was also a form of power, because to be desired was to hold the thoughts, the decisions, and sometimes even the fate of those who desired you. From the flicker of a torch in Sumer to the shimmer of gold jewelry in Thebes, this early art of seduction would leave its mark on every empire to come. And next, the Nile will carry us to the woman whose name became a synonym for irresistible power, a queen who bent two of Rome's greatest leaders to her will, not with armies, but with a single entrance. If seduction had a patron saint, her name would be Cleopatra, not because she was the most beautiful. In truth, ancient accounts suggest her beauty was not flawless, but because she understood something deeper. Beauty fades, but presence endures. When Cleopatra became queen of Egypt, she inherited a throne under siege. Rome's shadow was lengthening, and the Nile's gold could only protect her if she could control the men who controlled the world. She did not have the largest army. What she had was the most dangerous stage in history, and she knew how to use it. The first act was for Julius Caesar. Picture this, night along the Nile, the water thick with the scent of lotus flowers. In the palace, Roman guards stand watch, unaware that the queen they've been ordered to ignore is already inside. She has herself smuggled into Caesar's presence, rolled in a carpet, the humble gift of a servant, delivered without fanfare. The carpet is unrolled, and there she is, not in chains, not in fear, but sitting upright, eyes locked on his, dressed in the gleam of gold and the white of linen. It is the most deliberate breaking of expectations imaginable. She has turned herself from supplicant to spectacle in a single moment. Psychologists call this pattern disruption, catching the mind off guard, breaking the rhythm it expects. In that gap, influence slips in unnoticed. Caesar, seasoned in politics and war, still remembers this moment years later. Cleopatra knew that seduction was not just about drawing someone toward you. It was about making them believe they had discovered you on their own terms. She gave him stories he could retell to himself. The daring queen, the dangerous ally, the woman unlike any other. Her meetings were designed like theater. The scent of jasmine would reach a man before she did. Her voice was musical, rising and falling like the Nile in flood season. She spoke many languages, switching between them mid-conversation, a reminder that she could be anyone a man wanted her to be. And yet, she was never passive. Every gesture, every glance, every silence was measured. The art was in making it seem unplanned. With Caesar, it was not a love story. It was a treaty, sealed not in ink but in shared ambition. He gave her political stability. She gave him Egypt's wealth and the intoxicating taste of ruling beside a queen who seemed carved from legend. Years later, she would repeat this with Mark Antony, but grander. She sailed to meet him not in secret, but in blinding splendor, a barge with sails of purple, oars of silver, and crew dressed as living gods, the air heavy with incense, the decks strewn with flowers. Antony, the soldier, would find himself waiting on the dock like a boy waiting to be chosen. This was seduction elevated to statecraft, the manipulation of setting, timing, and ego to secure power, and Cleopatra, more than any queen before or after, understood the truth. Desire is never just about the body. It is about the mind's hunger to be seen and remembered. And so she remains, not just a ruler, but a legend. Because her throne was never only in the palace, it was in the thoughts of the men who could not forget her. If Egypt perfected seduction as a stage performance, Greece and Rome turned it into a philosophy. Here, desire wasn't only an instinct, it was a skill to be studied, refined, and deployed like a weapon or a work of art. In Athens, the hetaerae, companions unlike any other women of their time, were trained in far more than beauty. They were educated in music, poetry, and the politics of the day. To sit beside a hetaera at a symposium was to enter a carefully crafted world where every word, every touch of a hand to a wine cup was a deliberate invitation. The hetaera didn't chase. She drew men in. She asked questions that made them feel brilliant, and then paused, just long enough for them to wonder what she was thinking. It was an art of attention, of making a man believe the universe had narrowed to the space between her gaze and his. Psychologists would now call this attentional focus, the sense that nothing else matters except the person in front of you. And it works, because humans are wired to crave significance. In that moment, with the right look, someone can make you feel as though you are the most important person alive. Rome, of course, took this idea and made it louder. The banquets of the wealthy were not simply meals. They were spectacles designed to disarm the senses, rooms heavy with the perfume of roses, petals drifting down from the ceiling, tables groaning under figs, honey, and roasted meats. Musicians played softly in the background while dancers moved in the flicker of torchlight. In this haze of wine and music, seduction became a game without rules. Whispers were exchanged between bites, fingertips brushed accidentally along forearms, and rivals measured each other not by strength, but by whose company the most desirable guests preferred. Some Romans elevated this to an extreme. Take Empress Valeria Messalina, a woman whose name became synonymous with unrestrained appetite. She was said to have wagered with one of Rome's courtesans to see who could take the most lovers in a single night, a scandal that fed her legend as much as her infamy. Whether this was truth or rumor didn't matter. In seduction, reputation is as potent as reality. The Romans understood the psychology. Seduction thrives in an environment where boundaries blur. When the mind is overstimulated with scents, sounds, tastes, and sights, reason steps aside. In its place comes instinct, and instinct is far easier to lead. From the quiet wit of the Greek hetaerae to the chaotic luxury of a Roman feast, the message was the same. Desire is not an accident. It is built, brick by brick, in the mind long before it ever reaches the body. And as the Roman Empire spread, so did its approach to pleasure, carrying this philosophy into the courts and castles of medieval Europe, where seduction had to adapt to a far more dangerous stage, one where a wrong move could cost you not just your reputation, but your life. By the Middle Ages, seduction had to become something else entirely, no longer the open performances of Egypt or Rome. Now it was a whisper behind a veil, a glance held too long in a crowded hall. The danger was real. A misplaced touch could mean exile or execution. In the courts of medieval Europe, desire became a language that only the initiated could read. This was the age of courtly love, a strange blend of romance, poetry, and restraint. A man might devote years to writing verses for a woman he could never touch in public. A woman might risk everything for the thrill of passing a folded ribbon into the wrong set of hands. Here, seduction was strategy wrapped in manners. It was about endurance, the ability to keep someone suspended in longing without ever allowing them to land. And in this, the medieval court was a perfect incubator. Everyone was watching. No one could speak plainly, and the walls themselves seemed to listen. In royal courts, lovers found places to meet in the narrow margins of daily life, the garden at dusk, the chapel after prayers, the moment between the last goblet of wine and the final candle being snuffed out. They used symbols like weapons. A sprig of rosemary to say, "Remember me," a blue ribbon to say, "I am yours," a dropped glove to say, "Follow me." Psychologists now call this signaling, creating private codes that deepen intimacy while keeping others in the dark. It works because secrecy binds people together. The more dangerous the shared secret, the stronger the bond. But secrecy also sharpened the edge of desire, because nothing fuels longing like the possibility of loss. Every glance across a feast table carried the risk of being noticed by the wrong eyes. Every whispered promise had to be disguised as piety or politics, and the heart, as poets knew too well, beats harder when the stakes are high. There were, of course, masters of this game, queens, courtiers, even spies who used the language of love to smuggle information or secure alliances. Their victories were measured not in kisses stolen, but in favors granted, rivalries cooled, or secrets delivered in the dark. And yet, the most dangerous seductions of the medieval age were not always between lovers. Sometimes they were between a ruler and their people, an entire kingdom wooed with promises, ceremonies, and the illusion of safety. From the careful restraint of courtly love, seduction would next move to perhaps its most theatrical stage in history. A palace where mirrors multiplied every glance and rumor could become reality before breakfast. Versailles, where desire was no longer hidden, it was part of the show. If the medieval court was a chessboard, Versailles was a stage, and every player an actor in the longest-running performance of desire ever seen in Europe. Here, seduction was not just personal. It was policy. Louis XIV, the Sun King, understood that to keep his nobles under control, he needed them under his gaze. So he built Versailles, not only as a palace, but as a gilded trap, a place where beauty, ceremony, and proximity to the king were as intoxicating as they were dangerous. Imagine arriving for the first time, a palace of endless corridors, mirrors multiplying your every movement, chandeliers spilling light onto floors, polished to a mirror shine. The air is perfumed with roses, ambergris, and intrigue. Every conversation is a performance, every gown and embroidered coat a statement, every smile calculated. At Versailles, mistresses were not simply lovers, they were political figures. Madame de Montespan, for example, rose from lady-in-waiting to the king's official mistress, her influence so strong that ambassadors courted her favor, as if she were a queen. She knew that seduction here was about visibility, to be seen, to be envied, to be whispered about. That was power. Psychologists would call this social proof, the idea that attention itself creates value. If others want you, you must be worth wanting. Versailles was built on this principle. The morning lever, when Louis awoke, was a ritual attended by nobles eager to help him dress, not for love, but for the opportunity to be noticed. The evening coucher worked the same way. Even watching the king eat was considered a privilege. In such a world, proximity itself was seductive. Women navigated this glittering battlefield with precision. They chose colors that flattered the candlelight, wore jewels that caught the king's eye from across the hall of mirrors, and mastered the art of the accidental touch in a crowded dance. Men competed too. For glances, for gossip, for the attention that could lift them higher in the unspoken hierarchy of favor. But at Versailles, seduction was never private. Every affair was public property. Every liaison carried the risk of scandal, and scandal, in the wrong hands, was a weapon sharper than any sword. The brilliance of Versailles was that it turned desire into theater, and the nobles into willing performers. They dressed, they danced, they whispered behind fans, not realizing that while they were seducing each other, the king was seducing them all. And when the curtain eventually fell on the Sun King's reign, the art of seduction did not fade. It simply moved from the palace halls to the salons, boudoirs, and secret apartments of the Belle Époque, where seduction was not only public performance, but private empire. By the late 19th century, Europe had entered the Belle Époque, an age of champagne mornings, velvet nights, and an intoxicating belief that beauty itself could be a kind of immortality. And in this world, the great seducers were not kings or queens, but women who lived outside the rules. They were called Demimondaines, half-world women, because they moved between respectability and scandal with equal ease. They were courtesans, actresses, and salon hostesses whose names were known in every ballroom and whispered in every bedroom. A demimondaine understood that desire was an economy. She traded in glances in conversations that seemed effortless, but were rehearsed like a play. She invested in gowns that could stop conversation, layers of silk and lace that shimmered in gaslight, each stitch designed to catch the eye. Her currency was exclusivity. She was available to very few, but visible to everyone. Picture a Paris salon at midnight, the air thick with cigar smoke and perfume, the low murmur of conversation punctuated by the pop of champagne corks. She enters not in a rush, but in a slow drift, as though time moves differently around her. Men rise instinctively. Women take mental notes. The hostess greets her as if she has just stepped off a stage, which in a way she has. Psychologists would call this scarcity bias. The less accessible someone appears, the more valuable they seem. The Demimondaine did not compete for attention. She created the impression that attention competed for her. They inspired art, literature, and even politics. La Belle Époque, born in poverty in Spain, became the most celebrated courtesan of her age. Her lovers included kings, dukes, and financiers. She was said to have started fashion trends with a single gown and bankrupt fortunes with a single night's company. But there was always calculation beneath the glamour. They knew the lifespan of beauty in this business was short, so they invested in jewels, in property, in the quiet security that would allow them to disappear when the time came. Because true seduction is not about the chase, it's about knowing exactly when to step off the stage. And so the Belle Époque became a gilded echo of all the ages before it. The temples of Sumer, the barges of Cleopatra, the feasts of Rome, the dances of Versailles, all reborn under the glow of Parisian gaslight. But even the most glittering age must fade. The 20th century would bring war, cinema, and new icons of allure. Seduction would leave the salons and move to the silver screen, where a single look, magnified 40 feet high, could captivate millions. By the dawn of the 20th century, seduction had found a new stage, one that was brighter, louder, and far more dangerous in its reach. No longer confined to courts, salons, or palaces, it now lived on the silver screen, and in the flicker of projected light, the ancient arts returned. With new costumes, Hollywood's golden age created its own queens of allure, women whose faces could be seen in every city, whose voices carried through every radio, whose photographs found their way into pockets, diaries, and dreams. And yet, for all the modern technology, the rules were the same as they had been for Cleopatra, or the hetaerae of Athens. Greta Garbo mastered the art of distance. She rarely smiled in public, guarded her private life like a fortress, and made her audience feel they were forever on the brink of knowing her, but never quite did. Scarcity, mystery, control over access. The same tools that had worked in the courts of Versailles now glowed on the big screen. Marlene Dietrich, by contrast, was performance embodied. She used her voice, low, unhurried, and her gaze, steady, unblinking, to command attention. Costume became her weapon, tuxedos, glittering gowns, uniforms. Each one a statement, each one telling a different kind of story. It was Cleopatra's barge all over again, just dressed in satin and shot in black and white. Psychologists today would call much of this parasocial connection the illusion that you know someone intimately when, in reality, you know only what they allow you to see. Seduction, after all, is not about showing everything. It is about revealing just enough. Even in politics, the art persisted. World leaders have long known that appearance. The way you enter a room, the way you stand, the way you pause before speaking, can shape how people feel about you before you've said a single word. The same techniques that once convinced a Roman general or a medieval queen now shape entire nations. And then came the internet, a new empire, sprawling and chaotic. Here, seduction adapted again, not just through beauty or status, but through relatability, humor, the curated glimpse of real life behind the scenes. But make no mistake, whether in a temple bathed in oil lamplight or on a smartphone screen at midnight, the psychology is unchanged. Seduction is about perception, the skill of arranging reality so that others see you as you wish to be seen and desire what you wish them to desire. And so we return to the truth we began with, before kings, before empires, before wars. There was the glance, the pause, the smile that made someone forget what they were about to say. The players change, the costumes change, but the game is eternal. And now, the lights dim, the perfume fades, the last whisper in the corridor falls into silence. The story of seduction is not just a history of queens and courtesans, kings and movie stars. It is the story of being human, of wanting to be noticed, understood, and remembered. From the temple courtyards of Sumer to the mirrored halls of Versailles, from Cleopatra's golden barge to the glow of Hollywood film reels, the art has always been the same. A glance, a pause, a moment suspended in air. Seduction was never only about the body. It was about creating a space where someone felt seen in a way they had never felt before, and in that space, they lingered. If you listen closely, you can still hear it, the echo of soft laughter in a marble hall, the rustle of silk in a candlelit room, the faint splash of oars in the Nile at night. Time has taken the players, but the feeling remains, drifting through history like a low, unending melody. And perhaps it has reached you now, not as a scandal or a conquest, but as a gentle reminder that the oldest art in the world is not about taking. It is about creating a moment worth remembering. So let the images fade. Let the voices fall quiet. Breathe in, slow and deep. Breathe out, softer still. Tonight there are no games to play, no courts to navigate, no glances to read. Only the quiet certainty that you have wandered through centuries of candlelight and silk and returned here, safe, warm, and ready for rest. The stage is dark, the curtain falls, and you can sleep.